All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep into one of those stories that just grabs you and doesn't let go, the tragedy of Thebes. Ever feel like some families are just cursed?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this one might take the cake. We're talking ambition, revenge, and, oh yeah, a whole lot of divine intervention.
It's just amazing how this story, written thousands of years ago, still feels so relevant. It makes you think about those really big questions. Free will versus fate, the corrupting nature of
And we're
power.
going to try to unpack it, all right?
Yeah.
Using this source you sent me, we're going to take a deep dive into how Thebes, this once mighty city, basically imploded thanks to one seriously messed up royal family.
You know, it's interesting because the story really picks up after Oedipus, the former king, leaves Thebes. He's carrying the weight of, well, let's just say some pretty intense family drama.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
We won't get into all of that right now, but suffice to say, he leaves this massive power vacuum.
So the city's vulnerable, there's no clear leadership, and enter stage left, Oedipus's two sons, Eteocles and Polynices. Talk about sibling rivalry taken to a whole new level.
Right, and it's not just the typical bickering over who gets the bigger bedroom. These guys are vying for the throne of Thebes. Now, Eteocles, being the older brother, initially positions himself as the guy who will bring everyone together, heal the city after all the drama.
I'm sensing a butt coming here.
Oh, there's a big but, all right. And the thing about power is it can be intoxicating. Eteocles, despite his initial good intentions, starts to slip. He becomes this iron-fisted ruler, more concerned with control than with unity. It's like that quote, power doesn't corrupt, fear corrupts. Perhaps the fear of a loss of power.
So much for family harmony. What about Polynices? Was he just twiddling his thumbs while all this was going down?
Not exactly. He's exiled by his brother, stripped of his claim to the throne. You can imagine the resentment simmering there. And instead of just accepting his fate, Polynices decides to fight back.
Oh, this sounds like it's about to get messy.
Messi doesn't even begin to cover it. Polynices does something pretty drastic. He allies himself with the Argives, Thebes' sworn enemies. We're talking full-blown betrayal here. He assembles this army driven by this burning desire to take back what he believes is rightfully his.
So we've gone from a power vacuum to a full-scale civil war with brothers leading opposing armies. This is giving me some serious Game of Thrones vibes.
And just like in those epic stories, there's a prophecy looming over all of this. You know, those pesky pronouncements of doom that never seem to end well in Greek tragedies.
Oh boy. So this clash of brothers, this war, how did it all go down?
Well, imagine the scene. Thebes under siege, the Argive army pounding at the gates. It all culminates in this incredibly dramatic duel, brother against brother, each fueled by years of resentment and ambition.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What happens in this duel?
They kill each other, both Eteocles and Polynices dead on the battlefield, victims of their own thirst for power.
Talk about a lose-lose situation. Thebes may have technically won the war, but at what cost? They lost both their princes, the throne's empty again, and I imagine the city is in ruins.
Exactly. It's a Pyrrhic victory, one that leaves everyone worse off. This reminds me of a quote by Sun Tzu. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Clearly, neither brother grasped that concept.
So two brothers dead, a city in shambles. What happens next? Who picks up the pieces?
Well, this is where Creon enters the picture. He's the brother's uncle, and he steps into the leadership void, hoping to restore order.
New leadership, a fresh start. Maybe things are finally looking up for Thebes.
I wouldn't get your hopes up just yet. Creon's reign starts off on a very rocky note. He issues this decree, and let me tell you, it throws fuel on an already raging fire.
Oh, I'm sensing some drama here. What did he do?
Remember how important burial rites were in ancient Greece?
Uh-huh.
It was more than just putting a body in the ground. It was about ensuring the soul's safe passage to the afterlife. Well, Creon decides that Polynices, the brother who attacked his own city, is a traitor. He denies him a proper burial.
Wait, seriously. I mean, the guy's dead. What's the point of denying him a burial?
It was a power move, pure and simple, a way for Creon to assert his authority, punish his nephew even in death, and send a message to anyone who might consider defying him. Obey me or face the consequences, basically.
But this isn't just about one dead prince. This is messing with deeply held religious beliefs. Did people just stand by and let this happen?
That's where the real conflict ticks in, because Creon's decree creates this massive ethical dilemma. Do you follow the law of the land even if it feels morally wrong? Do you risk defying the king to honor what you believe is right?
Tough questions. And I'm guessing those questions lead to even more drama.
Oh, you have no idea. And that's where we'll pick things up in part 2 of our deep dive into the tragedy of Thebes.
So we left off with Creon, the new ruler of Thebes, making a pretty controversial decision, denying Polynices a proper burial. Not exactly a move that screams compassionate leader.
Yeah, it really highlights how in ancient Greece, these burial rites weren't just symbolic gestures. They were seen as essential, absolutely essential for the soul's journey after death. The source you shared mentions that they believed the unburied dead could become these restless spirits, unable to find peace.
So Creon's decree wasn't just about punishing Polynices. It was about unleashing some serious spiritual turmoil on Thebes. Talk about adding insult to injury. But didn't this whole situation force people to choose sides? To really examine their own beliefs?
Absolutely. You had those who sided with Creon, emphasizing the importance of obedience to the law, no matter how harsh it seemed. They argued that Polynices was a traitor who deserved no leniency, even in death.
And then there were those who felt Creon was overstepping, that he was placing his own authority above divine law, right?
I
But who was brave enough to actually challenge him? I mean, the guy clearly wasn't afraid to throw his weight around.
Well, that's where Antigone Polynices' sister enters the picture. She becomes the embodiment of this moral struggle, the voice of defiance against tyranny. She believed that everyone, regardless of their actions in life, deserved a proper burial, according to the will of the gods.
Okay, so she's going head-to-head with Creon. What does she do? Does she write him a strongly worded letter, start a petition?
Antigone is not messing around. She takes matters into her own hands
Right.
and performs the burial rites for Polynices in secret, defining Creon's decree directly. It's this incredibly courageous act, knowing full well the potential consequences.
Wow, talk about guts. She knew Creon wouldn't hesitate to punish her, and yet she did it anyway. What was she thinking?
It's like she's throwing down this moral gauntlet. Your laws are meaningless in the face of divine justice, is basically what she's telling Creon.
It's a classic example of individual conscience clashing with the power of the state, something we still grapple with today. But let's be real, this is ancient Greece. We're talking about a king used to absolute obedience. What happens to Antigone when Creon finds out?
Well, Creon does what we've come to expect. He doesn't take it well. He sees Antigone's defiance as a direct challenge to his authority and throws her in prison, sentencing her to death.
So not only is he going against divine law, he's doubling down on his own stubbornness. Did anyone try to talk some sense into him?
Actually, yes. Tiresias, the blind prophet, steps in and warns Creon that his actions are going to have disastrous consequences. He predicts all kinds of calamities will befall Thebes if Polynices remains unburied and Antigone is punished.
So Creon's getting warnings from both the spiritual and the human realms. You'd think he'd take the hint, right?
But remember, Creon is deep in the throes of hubris at this point. He's convinced he's right, and he's not about to let some old prophet or a rebellious girl tell him otherwise. He essentially ignores Tiresias, clinging to his power even as it starts to slip through his fingers.
Talk about missing the forest for the trees. It seems like he's digging himself deeper into a hole with every decision. So what happens next? Does he stick to his guns and execute Antigone?
He does, but that's a story for part 3 of our deep dive, and let me tell you, it's a doozy.
So last we left off, Creon was, he was really digging in his heels, choosing to ignore everyone and everything, telling him to change course. What a stubborn streak. So what happens? Does he actually go through with Antigone's punishment?
He does. Antigone is sealed in a cave, left to die. Horrifying fate, meant to be both a punishment and, a deterrent to anyone else thinking of defying Creon.
But remember Creon's son, Haemon. He's in love with Antigone. How does he react to all of this?
Oh, he's devastated. He pleads with his father, tries to make him see reason, but Creon is just immovable. He sees any leniency as weakness, a threat to his authority.
So Creon chooses power over family. Even his own son, it seems like his pride has completely blinded him to the pain he's causing.
Exactly. It's this tragic irony. Creon's so obsessed with maintaining control that he loses control of everything, even his own family.
And I'm guessing this whole situation doesn't end well for anyone involved?
It doesn't. The prophecy that Tiresias warned about starts to come true. Thebes is hit with plagues and misfortunes, and the people start to turn against Creon.
So his iron grip is slipping. What does he do?
It's almost like a light bulb finally goes off. He realizes far too late that he's made a terrible mistake. He rushes to Antigone's tomb, hoping to set things right. But it's too late.
Oh no. What happened?
When Creon arrives at the cave, he finds Haemon cradling Antigone's body. She had taken her own life rather than suffer a slow death. And Haemon, in his grief and rage, turns on his father and then takes his own life.
It's like a domino effect of tragedy, all stemming from Creon's initial decision. And what about Eurydice, Creon's wife? How does she factor into all this?
She hears about her son's death, and unable to cope with the loss, she takes her own life as well.
Wow. Creon is left utterly alone, stripped of his family, his authority, even his dignity. Talk about a fall from grace.
The source you shared doesn't dwell too much on this, but I find it fascinating to think about what goes through Creon's mind at this point. Does he understand the magnitude of his actions? Does he feel remorse? It's left to our interpretation.
And that's the power of these ancient stories, isn't it? They raise questions that continue to resonate across centuries. So this curse on Oedipus's family, what happens to it?
The story ends with a sense that the curse has finally lifted, as if all the suffering has purged the family line. There's a glimmer of hope for Thebes, a chance for a new beginning.
It's a bittersweet ending, isn't it? So much loss, but also the sense of renewal. What do you think is the most important lesson we can take away from the tragedy of Thebes?
I think it's a story about the dangers of unchecked power and pride. Creon's downfall is a reminder that even the most well-intentioned leaders can succumb to the temptations of power and make decisions that have devastating consequences.
It's a reminder that we all need to be mindful of the choices we make, to listen to wise counsel, and to be willing to admit when we've made a mistake. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to explore these stories and to see how they continue to speak to us today.
And for our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to seek out the full story of Thebes. It's a tale that will stay with you long after you've finished reading it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.